to speak after four awesome speakers. I'm not talking about climate change, I'm talking about a very personal experience of dealing with trauma. People say to me it's extreme trauma. I class trauma as trauma. There's no extreme when you're going through it. It's difficult. Your life stops while everyone else's life moves forward.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Good, Black Dog. How you going, mate?
I'm alright. Not really that great, but...
Yes, mate.
I'm in a room which don't have guns. I'm very sick. I've been hospitalised for months. I don't get medicine.
No, that's right. That was a phone call that I made to my brother 11 months into my captivity. Just going back, I went to Somalia in August 2008 as a freelance photojournalist. I went to photograph the humanitarian crisis, the food crisis, and the famine that was about to hit that country. It sounds all very honourable. The thing that I don't say is that I went to make a name for myself, to make money from my images, and it was during captivity that I thought about what I was doing for a job, and it was really making money out of other people's misery. Yes, I understand that journalism does shine lights into the dark corners of the world where people don't have a voice, but it made me start to question my ethics of, was my job an honourable job? Was I making money from other people's misery? To talk about my entire captivity in 20 minutes is impossible. I spent 462 days in captivity. The time I came out, I was the longest held captive outside of a prisoner of war situation. I sit in a very unique club of people that are held for over 362 days. I spent a lot of it in isolation. Human beings are very sociable animals. We are not meant to be isolated. It starts to do things to your head when you're stuck in a room by yourself in a small 2 metre by 3 metre with the only thing to look at is the four walls and a window that's been closed so you don't even get to see the trees or the sky. I also spent quite a lot of time in ankle shackles, which were put on me after an escape attempt 5 months into our captivity. What I want to focus on today is that 25 minutes that we escaped from the house. I was in Somalia with another journalist, a Canadian woman who was a friend and colleague. We escaped after 5 months, after we had basically had no control of our lives, and we thought that we were both going to end up dying in Somalia. So we made an escape plan. It was very, very rough, not thought out, but from my perspective, I thought if I was going to die in Somalia through my captors, I was actually going to make them work for it. I'd been sitting on my bum for 5 months. I had no control. And I said to Amanda, moments before we went out the window, I said, you realise today the likelihood is we're going to get out and we're going to die. Do you feel comfortable with that? And she said, yes. She asked me the same thing and I said, yeah, let's do it. We got out of the house. I was expecting to have a 5-minute head start on our captors. It ended up being about a 5-second head start when the next door neighbour's young child saw us and started screaming in Somali. All I can imagine that he was screaming was, there's white people outside. We ran, my brain completely switched off, as it does when you're under massive amounts of stress and anxiety and under adrenaline. And I ran like a head with its chicken cut off. I left Amanda in the dust. I got to a T intersection, I could see the mosque, and my body actually turned left instead of turning right, running towards the main road where the marketplace was. And then finally, my brain clicked in, I turned around and I started running back towards the mosque, picking up a guy who spoke English, got inside, just before we got inside the mosque, there was a bullet that was shot over our heads as a warning shot. So unbeknownst to me or Amanda, 2 of our guards were in close pursuit with AK-47s. And what I found when I got into the mosque, even though I was hysterical, where there were 3 older gentlemen that were trying to help us. They spoke English. They asked who we were and what we were doing. We said that we were both freelancers, we'd been kidnapped for 5 months, and that we were Muslim. Amanda and I had made a decision very early on in our captivity as a survival technique to convert to Islam, because we thought it would give us preferential treatment and it would keep us alive for longer. Now, I was absolutely surprised that these guys were trying to help us. About 10-15 seconds after we were inside the mosque, I was king hit from behind by one of my young captors. Amanda was being pulled by her hair, they were trying to get us outside of the mosque. And these 3 guys who were unarmed, I'm guessing in their 50s, took these 2 young guys by the throat and pushed them up against the wall to protect us from them. And then a crowd then enveloped us and put us into the pulpit of the mosque. So at this stage, I am have verbal diarrhea. I'm speaking in Somali, I'm speaking in Arabic. I'm basically saying verses of the Quran, saying that I'm Muslim, trying to get these people to protect us. And I think everyone's astonished. I don't think anyone had ever seen a white person or a Westerner before, and their eyes looked like dinner plates as we were sitting in the pulpit of the mosque, with me saying, I'm Muslim, we are Muslim. And at one point, a woman came in, attached herself to Amanda, was trying to protect her. And then one of the strangest things happened. I saw a guy, big beard, big blue shirt, walk in. The crowd parted so he could come up to me. And he greeted me in the Islamic fashion, Assalamu alaikum. I said back, wa alaikum assalam. And he said, Wanahe Muslim, which means I'm Muslim. And I said, Wantahe Muslim, we are Muslim. And then he spoke to me in English and he said, and how is your Islam? And I looked at him and I lied and I said, I love Islam. And he came down and he kissed me on both cheeks, and I thought this can't get any more bizarre. And then he took his AK-47 off his shoulder, picked it up in his hands like this, and then he said, this is the gun of the Muslim. He said, you are my brother in Islam, I want you to have my gun. And he dropped an AK-47 in my lap. And I grew up on a farm and I knew how to shoot 303s and stuff like that. I'd never picked up an AK-47, and the manic thought that went through my head is, I wonder how many bullets are in the magazine, and I wonder how I get this thing off safety, because I'm going to kill as many people as I can possibly kill, because I'm pretty sure that we're going to die here today. And then the second thought that came into my head was, I never ever want to know what it's like to kill another human being. I never want to take another human being's life. So I picked up his gun and I handed it back to him and I said, brother, I don't want your gun. I don't want to ever kill another person. And everyone in this mosque today is Muslim, and it's against my religion to kill another Muslim. And I handed his gun back to him and he said, come with me, brother, and I'll take you to safety. And I said, no, we're going to wait until the Imam comes. He's going to interview us. And this is what we've been told, that the Imam would interview us, and if we were in fact Muslim, as we had stated, that they would protect us and they would take us to safety. Must have been 15-20 seconds after he left, the crowd of people that were surrounding us suddenly started to disperse very quickly away from us as quickly as possible. And as I could see them spreading out through the mosque, what I could see coming in from the sides of the mosque was masked gunmen with AK-47s and pistols. And I'm not talking 5 or 10, I'm talking 40 or 50 guys that I'd never seen before. Obviously other groups, other militia. And I thought, not only am I going to now die, but I'm actually going to have caused the death of so many innocent people that are in this building. And no sooner had I thought that, the crowd stopped, and then they enveloped us again. And this happened another 1 time or 2 times, I think. Until finally, our guys, our head guys of our group arrived, and they were angry. They'd lost face. We'd embarrassed them in front of their community. They came in, they basically ripped Amanda and I off the ground. Amanda was ripped off my side with this woman trying to hold on to her legs while she was being dragged out of the side of the mosque by her hair, screaming and kicking. I went into protection mode and put myself in the corner of the pulpit, trying to see what Amanda was doing, having people screaming at me in my face, abusing me, and finally I lost sight of Amanda as she was taken outside. And moments later I heard just one single gunshot, and my worst thoughts had come to realisation that she had just been executed. And I was seconds, minutes away from my own death. And it's funny, human beings, we have a fear of death for some reason, and I don't understand it, maybe because of the trauma I've gone through for 15 months. When we're born, we're already starting to die. Death will become us all. It's a natural part of life. The guys that had taken Amanda out came back quickly for me. I was pistol whipped across the back of the head. I had no other option than to go into fetal position on the ground as I was punched and kicked, and finally had my legs grabbed, my ankles grabbed, and I was dragged towards the front entrance of the mosque, down some concrete stairs, through a concrete courtyard, knowing that my death was imminent. Finally to be picked up by 6 or 8 guys in a stretcher position over their heads. And I was so surprised at how incredibly clear and calm my thoughts were. The 2 thoughts that came into my head was, geez, I really wish I had a mobile phone to call my mum and dad and explain how incredibly sorry I am for the trauma that I put them through for the last 5 months. And also just to say, I haven't told you for 5 months how much I love you. And I didn't think I was going to get that chance again. I walked, was being carried to the front of the courtyard gates, knowing that as soon as I got through those gates, I was a dead man. And to my surprise, as I walked through those gates, I saw the 2 vehicles that we were normally transported in, and I saw my friend and my colleague Amanda alive in the back seat, kicking a guy in the face, trying to get out of the car, still putting up a fight as I was bundled in beside her. Smiling at each other like Cheshire cats, like idiots, like the village idiots. And I looked at her face, and she'd been punched in the eye very, obviously quite hard. Her eye was starting to swell, and she looked at me with this smile. And no lie of a word, she said to me, "Fuck, that was intense." And I said, "Yeah, that was pretty fucking intense." And then she looked at me and she said, "Nigel, I'm so sorry that I made you escape." And I said, "Amanda, you didn't make me do anything that I didn't want to do." For the first time in 5 months, for 25 minutes, we'd taken control, and I called it my 25 minutes of consciously created freedom. For 5 months, I hadn't been conscious. I had let someone else control my life. For the next 10.5 months, I was treated more like an animal than a human being. I was shackled. I was not allowed to stand up. I was forced to lie or sit 24 hours a day. The only time I was allowed to stand was to walk to the toilet. Every single privilege that we take for granted, every single freedom, every single human right was taken from me. You have no idea how incredibly powerful a simple object like a pencil can be to a person in captivity. To be able to draw, to be able to write. And it became a struggle for me for the next 10.5 months, not against my captors, but against myself. A struggle in my mind. They could torture me, they could abuse me, they could beat me. The one thing that they couldn't do was actually affect my mind, and that's what I had to deal with over the next 10.5 months. I was eventually released. The picture that you see here is the ransom that my family ended up paying. It's about $750,000 US that was electronically transferred into Somalia. It was picked up by some knuckle draggers, as my sister called them, some ex-SAS boys, and eventually was handed over to the kidnappers, and we were released. My Nigel Brennan photo, brother of a summer, been larging it. This is 15 months of beard time in Somalia. I can't tell you how incredibly happy I was to fly over the border of Somalia and Kenya, to be reunited with my family after 15 months. That was Amanda and I touching down in Wajir Airport, so just across the border from Somalia, going through customs, putting those lovely clothes on that they gave us. And I learned so much about myself in 15 months, more than I had learnt about myself in 33 years before I was kidnapped. Probably more than I will learn about myself in the rest of my life. I'm planning to have children. I'm sure they will teach me some things. But this quote I found by Martin Luther King, I think, sums it up for me. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in a moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. Every single person will face trauma in their life. We will all face stress in our life. People that say, I don't want stress in my life, I have a stress-free life, are living a lie. It's actually good to have some stress in our life. It fires our engine, it fires our brain. Trauma is something that we don't like in our life. And I've come to believe this as well, that the universe only gives you what you can handle. Take advantage of those situations and grow from them. They are meant to make you stronger. I came out of captivity, I was 61 kilos. I spent a lot of time with psychologists and doctors. My psychologist, when I first got out, actually asked me one of the first questions. He said, do you feel like you've been through a trauma? And I said, no, I don't. And he's like, why not? I said, because I'm alive, I'm free, I have my life back. And he said, I can tell you, you have been through one of the most extreme traumas that any human being will go through. And I get that quite often. People say to me, but your trauma's extreme. And I say, what makes trauma extreme? For me, trauma is trauma. My trauma, somebody else's trauma, is exactly the same thing. It's how you deal with your trauma. I think in life, when trauma happens to us, we try and push it away. We don't want to own it. We don't want to embrace it because it scares us. I think if you embrace it and you own it, you'll actually come through it and you'll be a much stronger, much rounder person. I've just lost my train of thought. I came home, I was diagnosed with things like post-traumatic stress disorder, brutal captivity syndrome, all of these disorders that doctors like to label you with. I had an idea of what PTSD was. I had no idea what brutal captivity syndrome was. Wasn't until a period of time after my recovery, after doing some reading and research, that I got speaking to someone about post-traumatic growth phenomenon. And it's something I'd never heard of. We like to label things and put things in nice little boxes. And I said, what's this post-traumatic growth phenomenon you're talking about? And this lady said to me, well, the fact that everyone goes through trauma, we deal with trauma in different ways. Some people embrace it, some people don't. But the majority of people that go through trauma, 75% in fact, will have some sort of growth experience from that. So you will come back out of that, you'll become more understanding, you'll become more compassionate, you know things about yourself, you understand yourself more, you're less judgmental. All of these things that you learn, that I learn about myself in captivity. Human beings don't like to internalize. We have all of these shiny little objects that keep our lives so neat and tidy, that we externalize. We watch television, We have our mobile phones, our iPads, we have the internet. Yet, when you actually start to look inside yourself, you realise that, hey, I am not perfect. I do have my flaws, and that's okay. I had too much time to internalise. There were times in captivity when my memory was both friend and foe to me. I used to think about things that I had done, things that I'd said, the way I'd spoken to people when I was a 16, 17-year-old boy, and I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of those things that I'd said were to women because I was insecure about myself. And I promised myself a few things when I was in captivity, that if I did come out alive, healthy and happy, and I got my life back, that I was going to change the person who I was. And it takes effort to change who you are. I came out of captivity. I found some contacts of people that I wanted to ring and apologise to, and they were old girlfriends, mainly, who I rang up, and I explained to them, I said, I don't know if you remember this, but I've had 15 months to think about this. When I was 16, 17, I spoke to you because I was speaking from a place of fear, and I said things that I have absolutely no idea how they affected your life, and I'm embarrassed, and I sincerely apologise. And I was quite amazed. Most of them said, I don't remember it like that, but shit, it's nice to hear your voice. And they said, it's nice to think that you were thinking about me and thinking about those things in captivity. I've done a lot of work on myself, a lot of self-healing. I did a lot of work with psychologists. I'm an advocate for mental health. It's such a major problem in our society. It doesn't get enough funding. It doesn't get enough recognition, particularly with younger men, with our suicide rates and those sorts of things. I don't have a problem with going and sitting on the banana lounge and talking about my feelings. I actually like going and doing that and dumping my shit on a psychologist and walking out the door and saying, have a nice day, deal with that. Very recently, I guess I'm coming up to almost 6 years since my release from captivity. Probably in those first few years, I was still hyper alert, hyper aware, hypersensitive. It has taken time to erase those feelings from captivity. I think I live a pretty normal life. I don't think I will ever be the person that I was before captivity. In some respects, I'm incredibly grateful for have had that experience. 6 weeks ago, I get a call from the Australian Federal Police saying there's going to be a major event occur in regards to your case. I'd done debriefs with the Australian Federal Police, with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as well, in regards to what I went through in captivity and what occurred to my friend and colleague Amanda Lindhout. Sure enough, 48 hours later, this guy, I didn't know him as Ali Omar Adir, I knew him as Adam. He was one of the guys that was involved with my case, and he had just been arrested in Canada. How he got there, I still don't know. He's going through court at the moment, through a court process. He's been charged with the arrest. He's been charged with the kidnapping of Amanda Lindhout. Because I'm not a Canadian citizen, he can't be charged with my kidnapping. I saw this news and I got straight onto Twitter, and my girlfriend said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just doing a little tweet. And I wrote something like, amazing news about the arrest by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police of Ali Omar Adir, aka Adan. Finally, justice will be served, #karma. My girlfriend read it and said, you're an idiot. And I think I wrote another tweet, stupidly, because I was coming from a place of fear and not from a place of love. All of the things that I taught myself and learned through captivity quickly went out the window because of this anger and hatred that had come back. And I got quite a few retweets. And then a few days later, I actually put up a tweet and said something about, it seems that the world's media have already judged this guy. Let's not forget that in a Western society, he is innocent until proven guilty. I did not get one retweet, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't know if this guy was the guy. I'm not 100% sure, 97% sure that he was involved, but I can't be 100% sure until I'm standing in front of him. I hope I get to stand in front of him at some point, whether it's through his court case, if he goes to jail. I would actually like to go and visit him in jail. People say, do you want to punch him? Do you want to kick him? Do you want to smack him? And I said, no, I don't want to do any of that. I actually want to hug him and say, in a way, thank you for changing my life for the better. You've made me a better person who's more understanding, who's more grateful, who's more compassionate. You, unfortunately, are now going to learn a lesson because you were greedy. Your family, your children are no longer going to have your support because you are more than likely going to spend the rest of your life in jail. So you're going to have a lot of time to think and ponder and internalise, which is not going to be nice because we don't like to do it. How am I going for time? I love this man. Some people in Africa don't. Some people call him a terrorist. Every man's freedom fighter can be classed as a terrorist. I had this guy's book in Captivity, The Long Walk to Freedom. I got it as part of a care package about 3 months into our captivity. How it got to our kidnappers, I have no idea. I had a number of books in captivity. One was 1,000 Splendid Suns. I had a couple of Ernest Hemingway books, who I now love reading. But this guy's book was really my Bible to survival. I read his book, I'm thinking about 75 times. I've never read a book more than twice. Reading a book 75 times does start to get a bit dull because there's not really that many surprises left. But I was amazed to read his story, particularly his story of being imprisoned for 28 years, the way he was treated and his fellow colleagues of the ANC were treated. And to think that he could have come out after 28 years in jail and have so much love and so much forgiveness in his heart to try and then rebuild a nation was amazing. So I thought, if this guy can do it after 28 years, surely I can do it. I had no idea at that stage how long my captivity was going to be. Could have been a year, it could have been 2, it could have been 5, but I guess I came out and took a lot of my learnings from him about forgiveness. So my points, or my take-home messages, my mantra, and I actually found this the other day. My girlfriend's cousin has a book on birth dates, and I looked up the 18th of May, it was a whole 2 pages, and my mantra is actually, and this too shall pass. Since coming out of captivity, I've done some amazing things. I've sailed halfway around the world. I've done a yoga teacher training instructor's course, and I've also done a number of meditation sits. In particular, the Vipassana meditation, where you sit in silence for 10 days, and everyone says, what, you can't talk for 10 days? And I'm like, that's the easy part. It's the part of actually sitting and trying to learn how to control your mind. And one of the teachings in Vipassana that they talk about is that human beings really, we love misery. We love to create misery in our lives. And the way we do it is we have cravings or aversions to things that we like or hate. So instead of just observing them, because everything in life, us, the chair, this building is constantly changing. It is arising and it is changing. So if you actually acknowledge that and have no reaction to it, then this too shall pass. You're going through trauma, there is a start point, there will be an end point. It's not going to last forever. For me, coming from a place of love, instead of coming from a place of fear or hatred, I guess I've learned this particularly in the last few years with my yoga and stuff, opening up my heart. I have a acupuncturist who I go and see, who I've just started going to see. Chinese guy, and he's hilarious. He spends 4 hours with you, 3.5 hours at it just talking before he sticks all those needles into you. And he said to me, "Nigel, so much anger. Why so much anger?" I said, "No, dude, I'm cool, I'm open, I'm in love with myself." No. He said, "Men, so much anger, always so much anger." And he goes, "Okay, I'll give you an example. I'm driving in a car beside you, I swerve at you, I give you a finger, tell you to fuck off. What do you do?" I said, "I swerve back at you, I said, fuck you." Why? Why straight to anger? Why are you giving me your energy? And I've done some work with healers, and one of the things he said to me, before you react, ask yourself, are you coming from a place of love, or are you coming from a place of fear? The majority of the time, we are coming from a place of fear and hatred. So being able to open your heart and be honest and show love to other people. Probably one of the biggest learnings I learned from my whole experience was the importance of family, friends and community, because without these things, you have zero. You can't choose your family. I'm pretty happy that I have the family that I have. I think every family has its intricacies. My family, I know people say you guys are pretty intense and a little bit retarded, but it's okay, that's our family. They spent 15 months basically working to get me to come home. Financially, I almost destroyed my family, and I came home and was quite surprised. My eldest brother gave me a hug and said, "I'm so proud that you followed your dream and that you were trying to help people that were less fortunate." My other brother, I explained this to the Year 9 students, gave me a hug and said, "I love you, but you're a dickhead. And I'm giving you 3 months to get fit, and then I'm putting you in a boxing ring and I am going to slam you." Because he was coming from a place of fear. It never happened. It took my brother Hamilton about 2 years to finally come around and said, "Right, I've forgiven you. You're still an idiot, but I forgive you." Being conscious and present and living in the reality of now. I think there's so many people that aren't conscious. So many people that live a buried life who don't even realise that they're breathing most of the time. We're too consumed about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen in a month's time that we forget to be in the reality of right here and right now, because that's all that matters. The rest of it is bullshit. Like I said, we all have our flaws. I've come to terms that I'm not perfect, even though my mother told me I was. She was lying. And certainly compassion towards others and not being judgmental. I think if we had a society where we were more open and more honest and more loving and showed more empathy and compassion, we would actually have a society that would be so much more enjoyable to live in. We wouldn't walk over the top of each other for money and success. The speakers today were talking about what's happening to our planet. If we were more communal, there was a sense of community, then we wouldn't be trashing the earth. The gift of giving and being completely selfless. Yes, there's tsunamis that happen around the world, there's natural disasters. We're asked to put our hands in our pocket and give generously. I say screw that. Don't give money, give your time to an organisation where whether it's a day, a week, or a month. Go and actually see what these organisations do. Go and see the good that they do. Yes, still give money, but actually give some of your time. I work for a number of organisations, one of them in Queensland, which is QPAST, which works with trauma and torture victims, with asylum seekers. I go and work with a men's, it's called the X-Men group. So we do yoga, we go and play tennis. I take my dog along, Blackie. I think the guys actually like my dog more than they like me. But to go and see what this organisation does for guys that are living on bridging visas, who aren't allowed to work, who are basically stuck most of the time in their houses dealing with mental illness and those sorts of things, to have some sort of sense of community where they can come together with other guys, is such an empowering thing for me. I wish I had more time to do stuff like that. And as I was talking earlier about post-traumatic growth, every single person in this room will go through trauma in their life. Some of us will go through multiple traumas. I know my mother has said it seems that our family faces a trauma about every 15 to 20 years. My brother was nearly killed in 1985. I then got kidnapped. She goes, hopefully I'll be dead for the next one. Trauma to me is trauma. Having an understanding, having empathy for someone is an incredibly powerful thing. I get sick of people finding out my story and saying, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I say, why are you sorry? You did nothing. You weren't involved. And they're like, but you had to go through that trauma. It must have been horrific. And I say, it was horrific, but I learned so much about myself in those 15 months. I'm actually so incredibly grateful to have had that experience. So embrace it, own it, and this too shall pass. Thank you very much.